Hello everyone, welcome to another video on the channel. Welcome to a Gran Turismo 7 video. We're going to take a look at this week's Daily Race C and a kind of race review, and it's also going to have my opinion on a few things. We're going to take a look at just how alien are aliens, because I think this race that we're going to take a look at here sort of demonstrates, just the gulf in class and speed between the absolute top players in the game and somebody like myself who is, probably a top 1,000 driver in the game in terms of speed. But yeah, it's like multi-class sometimes when it comes to these races, and I think this race, as I said, demonstrates that quite well. We're going to talk about setups in the game. It's something that a lot of people have spoke about. I think it's maybe a reason why this race has not been quite as well received this week as you would expect for a Group 3 race around the Nurburgring. And finally, we're going to take a look at, well, my personal faltering desire to race, and I think generally maybe across some of the other people from what I've kind of gathered from chats and discords and community messages, that there's maybe a faltering desire to race across the wider community as well. But yeah, it's going to be a busy video, so if you don't like the sound of my voice, it's maybe not the best video for you, because I'm going to talk quite a lot in this one, but that's not unusual for one of my videos. So yeah, first thing we're going to take a look at though is this week's Daily Race C. We're in the Jaguar here, one of my favourite cars in the game. Recently received a fairly significant buff in Gran Turismo terms, where it got a little bit more extra power as well as losing some weight, so getting the double, if you like, in terms of being buffed. But you still don't see very many of them in the game, because this race is very much dominated by, do you know what, it's not like completely dominated by the Genesis, but the Genesis is definitely the best car. We've got Carhal in front of us in Nissan GTR, which seems to be another very good car as well. This is a car that seems to have gone back to its kind of OP tyre wear from around about maybe 6 months ago, where it just seemed to have insane tyre wear and absolutely no effect on the performance, even when you sort of ran the tyres down to like 80% worn. It seems to have possibly gone back to that kind of broken tyre model. I haven't tested it myself, I'm only kind of basing that opinion on what I've seen this week, but it is looking very good on the tyre wear anyway. Other cars that seem to be sort of fairly widely used is the Porsche, but I've kind of tried that myself. It's not a terrible car by any means, but it's definitely not as good as the GTR and the Genesis for the race. Now, back to the race in hand. We started this one in P4, and you see the driver that started in P1 actually went to the back of the grid, which promoted us up into P3. We were under a little bit of pressure from the Austrian driver that started behind us, but he came through the chicane and managed to beat it. So the pressure is off the back of the car as we start lap 2, and we're just about keeping up here with Carhal. Not too bad in the Jaguar, I would say. And now I had done a race prior to this one in the Jaguar as well, just try and get used to it. It still has that kind of weird handling characteristic where the kind of front end kind of pitches into the corner in a rather unsettling way, so it takes a few laps to get used to it. It kind of gives the car a good front end, but when cars kind of do unusual things in the corners, it can also affect your confidence in how hard you can push the car. So it's a strange car indeed, the Jaguar, even despite that recent buff. And I definitely haven't seen very many of them about in Daily Race C this week. So we're going to jump forward here to the end of lap 2, the start of lap 3. We're still in third place. We're starting to lose contact with Carhal in front of us. We're about 3 seconds off the lead now as well. And you're going to notice that a very fast World Tour driver has just moved into 4th place behind us now. As we exit turn 1 there, it was around about 2.1 seconds. I've seen, let's just say 2 seconds. And you're just going to see the difference between a World Tour driver, one of the fastest drivers in the game, and somebody like myself, who I said earlier on, can probably quite comfortably post a top 500 time for Daily Race C. And if I kind of went to like a hardcore time trial, I guess I could maybe get into the top 1000. So I'm no slouch, but I'm certainly not anywhere near the top level of the game. But you can just see the way that delta is coming down. He's already taken 7 tenths out of me as we come through the first sector. And you're probably thinking, well, Womble, you are in a Jaguar. Giuseppe behind you is probably in a Genesis. Well, I can tell you right now, Giuseppe is not in the Genesis, he's not in the GTR, and he's not in the Porsche. He's actually in the 2007 Lexus. Not 2007, 2017 Lexus, which is by no means a bad car in the game. but I don't think anybody would ever claim it is a meta car. And you can just see with every corner that delta is just coming down by 10th, by 10th, by 10th. I thought I'd get a couple of laps, clean laps, before Giuseppe would catch me, but as you can see, we're onto the back straight now. I'm not setting a particularly bad lap time for me here. I can do kind of sort of mid to high 55s in the Genesis. We've done a 56.3 in the Jaguar coming through the chicane here. We're going to do another 56.3 as well. So they're not like awful lap times. We're maintaining third place fairly comfortably in a sort of fairly decent grid as well. But coming out the last corner, we get a little bit of a oversteering moment, and Giuseppe is now 3 tenths behind us coming down into turn 1. Now I was kind of swivering here. Do I defend this? Do I kind of take my normal line? But I thought Giuseppe's in a hurry. I'll just kind of brake a little bit late. We'll just run wide into turn 1, give him the inside, and let him get through the... We're not going to beat Giuseppe, we know that, so the purpose is just do not lose as much time, or certainly lose as little time as possible. But with Giuseppe getting past, we've now got another incredibly fast driver behind us in ERM Antonio. He was 1.7 seconds at the exit of turn 1, and again, very similar situation here to Giuseppe. He is in the Nissan GTR. He's just closing that gap down, you know. It's just like he's in a different class. It's like a multi-class race the way that gap is coming down. And that is just the difference between the fastest drivers in the game and a mere mortal myself, who can comfortably hold, you know, a 60k DR. If I was to kind of do qualifying and use the meta cars, I could easily be like a 60k driver, 65k driver. But they're just in a different league, these guys. They are in an absolute different league. Coming up through the Schumacher S here, it's down to 7 tenths. With every corner, it's coming down more and more. I'm thinking, right, same plan here. Let's get to turn 1 and just let Antonio through. We're not going to hold him up. He's got places to be. I'm looking to lose as little time as possible. But even that plan was to go a little bit awry, because it was come out the corner onto the back straight. Antonio is on us now. I didn't want him going down the inside of me into the chicane here, so we are going to go defensive, because again, I still need to think of my own race. I'm trying to lose as little time as possible. We do go defensive. I don't think Antonio was planning on making the move. He gets the better line through the corner, and we have to yield into the last corner here. This was like a good option to kind of just run a little bit wide, slot in behind, get a little bit of slipstream, and lose as little time as possible. But yeah, folks, that is how aliens are in this game. The gulf in speed between the very top drivers and somebody who is reasonably competent, fairly decent at the game, is just massive at times. Now they are, well, certainly Antonio is in one of the OP cars, and we are, to be fair, in a Jaguar. But yeah, he's still taking about 2.5 seconds out of his lap, which is just a little bit demoralising at times, I must admit. But yeah, let's move on to the next part of this video, and that is to talk about setups. Now, setups is, well, I guess, a bone of contention, a controversial subject. It's sort of maybe not quite in the ethos of sport mode, I think a lot of people would say. My personal opinion on setups are that I don't particularly mind setups being part of the game. I quite like the way that Gran Turismo did it initially, where it was just a kind of limited selection. So, you know, just a couple of bits of the suspension that you could change in terms of maybe the compression and the expansion. And then they started bringing in like maybe frequency on top of that. I didn't mind it then, because as far as I was concerned, you couldn't really impact the performance of the car massively just through that kind of small selection of settings. You know, the difference between the standard setup and maybe you know, an exploited setup using those sort of maybe 2 to 3 different parts of the car you could change. There's only a few tenths, and that's always the problem when it comes to setups, not just in Gran Turismo 7, but pretty much every racing game out there. They get exploited because, you know, these games don't have real physics. You can kind of just go to the extreme on things. You can drive the cars in games completely different to how cars are driven, you know, in real life. You don't have the risk, so you know, you can kind of just... I've seen the same problems in iRace, and we know there's exploitable setups in ACC, and yet it tends to be what happens anytime you open setups up in any racing game. Now, as I said, I kind of like the way that PD did it by only giving a very limited selection, because it kind of reduced the amount of exploitation you could do with the setup. So you did know, even if you were just going in with a standard setup, that okay, right, they might have a setup on, they might have gained them 3 to 4 tenths, which, you know, isn't ideal, but it's not game breaking as well. It's not like they're gaining 2 seconds a lap, 1.5 seconds a lap, which can be the difference between setups in iRacing and ACC, between, you know, the very esporty setups that people sell to just using the setups that the game provides. And you can't afford to give up 2 seconds. You're just not going to be competitive no matter how good a driver you are. So yeah, that's initially when setups came into the game, I didn't think it was too bad. What I'm not that keen on with what Gran Turismo and PD are doing at the moment is just opening up more and more setup options. For example, this week we've got anti-roll bars, compression, expansion, frequency, as well as the limited slip differential. And I think just the more options you open up on the setups, the more influential setups then become on the game, and the bigger the gap between a standard setup and an exploited setup, or a kind of very well figured out setup, if you like, is going to be. And I don't think that's quite in the ethos of Gran Turismo Sport or Gran Turismo Sport mode, and I think it's kind of put a lot of people off this race this week from what I've seen. Now this is a popular combination, albeit it's an overused combination in the game, but we've not seen quite the same level of content creation on it as you might expect. And occasionally when I jump into a race, there's not quite as many, you know, top level drivers racing as you might expect. Even the kind of the evenings I've jumped on, I think I went on a Tuesday and Wednesday evening, did a couple of races, and it's not to say there's not like full A+ grids going on, but I think you know, there's you would expect, you know, pretty much all week for this race to kind of have a full A+ grid in the evening, and it's definitely not been the case. And I think just the setups and the fact that certain cars then become very overpowered with setups, the Genesis, I'm going by what other people tell me who are more experts on this, to be honest with you, but yeah, a lot of people are saying that once setups are open, the Genesis becomes almost unbeatable. Apparently you're going to exploit the setup on the Genesis a little bit more than you can on some of the other cars, and yeah, as soon as you limit car selection, then it can be a little bit of a turn off for a lot of people in these races. Now, in fairness to the Gran Turismo 7 community, most people will share their setup quite willingly on this game. It's not hard to find out what the OP setup is for the Genesis. You know, Wind basically puts his video out and tells you what his setup is on Monday. Key does, Digit does, Tidgeon will give you a setup. All these Discords as well will give you setups for these races. So it's not like some other games out there where it can kind of be secret squirrely stuff when it comes to setups, or you have to basically pay somebody or a subscription to get a setup for these games. In Gran Turismo, that definitely hasn't become a thing yet, and let's certainly hope it doesn't become a thing. But if PD keep opening up the setup options, and possibly in the future they're going to include all the suspension elements, all the limited slip differential elements, as well as gear ratios and then downforce, the difference between a standard setup and a tuned exploited setup is going to be like 1.52 seconds a lap, and that's going to open up a market for people to start selling setups, which is definitely not a direction we think this game wants to go. But yeah, as it stands, most people were quite willing to share their setups, and as I said, it's not too hard to find a competitive setup in some of the aforementioned places. And that brings us on to the final thing that I want to talk about in this video, and it's kind of just a personal opinion, but as I said, I kind of feel like I've kind of got this impression from some people within my own community when I've been kind of lurking in chats, what maybe some people are saying in the live stream chats that I lurk in. I kind of take a wee look on a few Discords, and I think there's just a faltering desire to play this game at the moment. Now this should have, I said, have been a very popular combination, but it's also the 4th time we've done it in Daily Race C. I think we've certainly done it in GTWS. I'm not sure if it's a Daily Race B at any point, but yeah, this is the 4th time we've taken Group 3 cars around the Nurburgring GP circuit. We've also done the sprint layout as well, we've done the Nordschleife. It's the most used location in the game for Daily Race C is the Nürburgring, if you include all the layouts of the circuit. Yes, even more than Lago Maggiore, honestly. Lago Maggiore isn't actually used that much in Daily Race C, it's a Daily Race A and B favourite, but we're just kind of specifically talking about Daily Race C. But yeah, I have to admit, the fact that, you know, we've done this combination a number of times, and then the fact that the setups came in, I was kind of looking forward to sort of using a lot of different cars here with just the standard setup and BOP. But once the setups came in, and it kind of just neutralised so many cars from being usable. I'm a good 7-8 tenths off the Genesis here in the Jaguar. I mean, I think the Genesis would be faster than the Jaguar in standard setups anyway, but I don't think it would be to the extent of that kind of gap. And I think, as I said, I think 90% of the cars fell into that category the moment it became a setup race, particularly with the number of setup options that are available. But yeah, my kind of desire to do this one has been fairly low, and that's why I've not live streamed this week, on combination of the fact that I'm actually working this weekend as well. But yeah, I just didn't feel like I could sort of sit down for 2.5-3 hours and do 5 or 6 of these races, folks. I really couldn't. Yesterday morning I had the opportunity to stream for about 3 to 4 hours, and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to stream World of Tanks on my other channel. If you're interested in my other channel, shameless plug here, I'll leave a little link in the description. Come and check it out. It's actually mostly populated by Gran Turismo folk, and half the time we actually talk about Gran Turismo in the World of Tanks streams. But yeah, come and check it out. We have a good laugh, we have some good fun, we get into the same games together. But yeah, I digress. We're here to talk about Gran Turismo 7. But yeah, my kind of enthusiasm for doing this daily race has been pretty low. I've done about 7 or 8 of them. I've used the Porsche, I've used the Genesis, I've used the Jaguar. It's by no means a bad race, it's a good race, but I just didn't have the desire to sit down and do a long session of it. And that primarily just comes down to the fact that it's just an overused combination. The setups have probably had an influence on my desire to race as well, but I'll tell you what probably has had the biggest influence on me not racing this week, and that's the fact that just over the last couple of weeks I've started doing my own open lobbies and endurance races, and the enjoyment of doing those races compared to like it's a standard daily race C, like a copy paste daily race C, just a standard fair 20-minute daily race C, is just massive compared to the sort of open lobby races I've been doing. We've done 3 endurance races. We did one open lobby where we went to Daytona in Group 3. Now you're thinking Daytona in Group 3 one, but we've done that loads of times. We just set the race up differently. We made it so you could only use a certain selection of MR cars that you never ever get to use whenever the race comes up as a daily race C. We kind of changed the day-night transition, so the kind of track was changing its look, and it was amazing, just that simple little difference. We also had some strategy in there as well, giving you some strategy options, but it was amazing just that little difference to that combination. Same combo, but just a tweak to the settings, and how much more interesting it made that race to go. As I was driving a Ferrari, I was driving the Ford GT, not the OP one, we were driving the 2018 one. Yeah, it just made it such a better combination. And some of the endurance races we've done, we did the Fuji race a good while back, but the rain came twice. It was 90 minutes around Fuji, the rain came twice in the race. There was all sorts of different strategies going on. We kind of limited the car selection in that one as well. We did the endurance race around, I think we did an endurance race around Daytona again as well, just in Group 4, but we just used the American muscle cars. We did an endurance race around Le Mans, limited car selection on that one. Again, you know, down to the wire who was going to win that, as somebody went on a extreme fuel saving strategy versus people who were kind of using the better tyres and able to rev the car out. So it went down to the wire. 3 different strategies basically finished within about 3 seconds of each other in that one. And yeah, just my enjoyment of those races has kind of really just highlighted to me how stale this daily race C has become at the moment. So I just, you know, my desire to race has been impacted by that, and as I said, I just get this general impression across the community that we're just a little bit fed up of the same thing. And I think PD really need to kind of take a good look at sport mode and just, you know, evolve it a little bit, just like bring in some different things, just to give the game that little bit of variety, that little bit of jeopardy. You know, for example, why are we here? Why are we at the Nurburgring on this race? Why have we not just kind of scrapped that mandatory pit stop, because we're not changing the tyres anyway, as you've seen, and just make it random weather? Even if the weather came 1 race out of 10, the fact that it was a possibility just takes this race to a different level. You'd have people racing it all week, guaranteed. If there was just a possibility of that rain coming towards the end, or it starts wet, or there's a little shower in the middle and you've just got to make that decision, just that kind of dynamic element to it would take this race to such a different level. But no, we've been kind of hamstrung with this mandatory pit stop. There's not enough tyre wear to change it. Setup's making one car fairly OP, and yeah, I think personally from what I've seen, the numbers of people racing have been pretty low this week for such a well-liked combination in general. But yeah, it's been a lot of talking here, folks. We finished this one in P6, by the way. Not a bad result in the Jaguar, I would say, given we've got Antonio who took the victory. Giuseppe came through us as well. McDonion's very, very fast, and Carhart and Kevin started ahead of us. I don't think a P6 in the Jaguar was too bad. We're under a little bit of pressure from Zape towards the end, but yeah, I thought that was a pretty decent result in the Jaguar, folks. It's definitely not the best car, but it can turn a lap, and it'd probably be pretty good in the right hands. But yeah, let me know what you think of what we've talked about in this video in the comments below. Love to hear your opinions as always. Yeah, we covered a lot. I've talked a lot. I've had to talk a lot over the last couple of days at my work as well, so my throat's certainly suffering from the last couple of days, and also from just doing this video. So I'm going to give my voice a well-earned rest. You can give your ears a well-earned rest if you've somehow managed to make it to this point, but I do appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye now.